Thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this interactive session. We're going to be trying a bit of an experiment with interactive voting and to get your views about the recipe for influence. And what we're going to do today is really talk about different influencing styles and how you can use them effectively. And one of the questions that we can ask ourselves is, why do we need another model of influence? There's already a lot of different approaches and models and ways of looking at influencing, as this slide shows. And I guess one of the challenges is that many of us have been on influencing skills courses before, and we might remember our own influencing style, but we sometimes struggle to remember the other ones of the model. And part of the challenge of influencing is to be thinking about when you need different styles, when you need to take a different approach. We all have our preferred style, but part of the trick is to work out when we need to change and when we need to adapt our style. And so one of the big challenges with a lot of these models is it's quite sometimes hard to remember your own style, but even more difficult to remember all the others. And I think of influencing as a bit like speaking different languages. We all have our preferred language, or maybe our preferred one or two languages, but sometimes you have to speak another language, which maybe you don't know. The trick is to be able to recognize that language and then find someone who can help work with you to speak in that language, to use that particular style of influence. And that's why we developed Recipe, which is designed as an easy way to remember the 6 most important influencing styles so that you can recognize them and know when to apply them. And also to think when you need to use a different style, which is maybe not your particular strength. So today, Zora and I are going to talk you quickly through the model, and then we're going to try the interactive experiment, which is a bit of an online global quiz, and we'll see how that works. But first, I'm going to hand over to Zora, who's going to talk about the different elements of the model.
Thanks for that, Stephen. So you'll see we have a mnemonic up on the screen. So Recipe, as Stephen called it, and it's the 6 styles of influence. The first is reward, second is exchange, connect, and those 3 in particular are very much what I would call relational styles of influence, and we'll go through each one in detail for you. The next one is the one that's very commonly used in business and with people that you might not know really well, and that's the informed style. And it's one that we tend to fall back on often. The next one is one that's used quite well by politicians, particularly during election campaigns. It's picture. It's much more about painting a picture, basically, about the future. And the last one is called exit. And that is one that is a really useful style to have in your back pocket and to pull it out when you might need it. So picture and inform are 2 styles that you would use more with mass audiences or larger audiences, whereas the other ones are really quite useful in a one-on-one situation or one to a few people situation. So we'll just kick off with the next slide and I'll take you through the first one there. So the first one is reward, and you'll see that we've included images of people that we think represent this style. It doesn't mean it's their sole style, it's just the style that we think is the preferred style that they have. So here we've got Bill Gates. Of course, most of you or all of you would know who he is. He's co-founder of Microsoft. He's also co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He's a philanthropist. What's particularly interesting about this style is it's, as I said earlier, it's about relationships. It's about investing in relationship. It's very much one where you give for the other person. You give of yourself. It's investing in a relationship, and it's about putting what you would call reputation beans into the bank. And it's very much, there's an element of a one-way piece to that one. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll just take you through what it sounds like. So in terms of what it sounds like, it's about, you hear it, so you might say, well, as a sign of good faith, let's do X, Y, Z, or oh, how about I do this for you, or something along those lines. Is you can recognise that particular style when you hear it and when you see it. I thought of it when I first was talking to Stephen about this a while back. I thought to myself, this is one that I tend to use. I use it a fair amount, and I use it in my role in IABC. I use it often because I'm investing in others. I am constantly giving off myself to other people and not necessarily for anything in return. And that's the thing about it. It's one where you don't necessarily expect anything in return. You use it when you don't need anything in the short term or anything immediate, and you use it when you're looking to establish that long-term rapport with someone. The thing about it is that every time you do something extra for them, you're investing in that relationship. But the challenge is to think about, are you putting too much in that reputation bank and not taking anything out of it? So you do need to bear that in mind. So it's a style that you can use, but you need to think about when you would use it. Stephen?
Yes, that's right. You know, every time you work a bit of overtime or do something extra for someone, you're doing some reward influencing in some way. And this is definitely all about putting reputation beans into the bank. There's one of the other styles later, which Zora is going to talk about, which talks about how you take beans out of the bank and how you use the relationship that you invested in with a very different style of influencing. But before we get onto that, I want to talk about exchange influencing. This is Indra Nooyi, who was the ex-chief executive of PepsiCo. And she got the job after a little internal competition with another candidate. And, you know, those of you who know the world of business will know that when that sort of thing happens and there's two internal candidates competing for one job, one of them normally gets it and the other one normally leaves and becomes chief executive somewhere else. When Indra Nooyi got the job of CEO of PepsiCo, she realized she wanted the other candidate to stay because he could add a lot of value to the business. So one of her first acts was to fly over to his office and make a deal with him so that he would stay. Gave him extra responsibilities and special projects, and they basically made an exchange to influence each other's behavior. He influenced her because he got more responsibilities, and she influenced him to stay. And so that's really what exchange is about. And I want to be clear about one thing. If it's a straight transaction, that is not influencing. If you're buying something, there is an exchange. You get the goods, the other person gets the cash. That's not influencing. The difference is that when it comes to exchange influencing, the exchange rate doesn't have to be equal. It can be, you know, you do something for me, I'll do something for you, and we kind of balance it out later. Quite often I use this style when I want to make sure the other person has some skin in the game. A lot of reward influencing can go into a vacuum if you're not careful about the bilateral nature of the relationship. So what exchange can do is just make sure that both people want something to happen, and it kind of establishes a bit of a framework for the partnership. So it can be good for motivating a team. It can also be good for testing someone's commitment. So, you know, put a little obstacle in their way. If somebody asks you to do something, you can put a small little obstacle to see what the exchange is. I was working in a tech company for a while, and part of my job was to give people presentation skills training. And so I sent out a note saying, we're offering free presentation skills training. All you have to do is look in my diary and find a slot and we can have an initial coaching conversation. And it was amazing how many people were very keen to have this free coaching, but weren't very keen to spend 2 minutes looking in my diary. And they kind of failed on the little obstacle. So a bit of exchange influencing can help you test out the other person's commitment. So now I'm going to hand back to Zora, who's going to talk about the next style.
Stephen, can I ask you a question? Do you know how long that person stayed that Indira did the exchange with?
They stayed for several years, which is quite unusual. You know, because like I say, normally, you know, the kind of defeated candidate leaves, but he got some special projects. I think he got an enhanced job title. he got to do a few things that he wanted to do. So it really made a difference to not only him and her, but also to Pepsi as a corporation.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, the next person I'm going to talk about, or the next style, is one that resonates with me. It's called Connect. And the person that I think really represents this to me is Dr. Kirsten Ferguson. So Kirsten is a board director with a number of different organisations. She's just last week finished up as the deputy chair for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, so ABC. She was also a pilot in the Australian Defence Force, and she's what she calls an accidental activist, and she's also a leadership coach. When she's an accidental activist, what she actually did was she created a movement called Celebrating Women. That was a few years ago. So it was in response to how women were being trolled on social media. And she decided to do something positive about it and created this amazing social movement on Twitter and Facebook. And she basically highlighted women from all sorts of walks of life, all different types of roles all over the world, and highlighted 4 things about them and celebrated each woman. And she did that for a year. I met her through that process, and I was one of those women, and I was really proud to be part of that. And she's since written a book called Womankind on it. So what she actually has done is that it's also about developing relationships, and she's probably one of the best that I've seen who does this really, really well. She, like the reward type, you're investing in relationships, you're investing in other people. But what it then enables you to do is it enables you to also call on those relationships when you might need them. And that's the really important differentiator between reward and connect, is that you can withdraw out of that reputation bank, out of that relational bank that you've actually developed. So Stephen, if you could go to the next slide. So what it sounds like is, it's when you're uniting in a way that you're talking about, this is what we can achieve together. You are creating that sense of unity, and you have a shared goal, and you identify a goal that you might be aiming for. It's particularly strong when you're dealing with internal communication, but I also find it's really useful when, as a type of influence, when you're needing to access a brain's trust, or you would like someone to do something for you, and they already know that you've been there for them in the past, and they will give back in return. I use this frequently, and Stephen will smile because he knows how often I do this. I just recently, and Stephen participated in this, so thank you very much. So I am in the process of updating a piece of research that relates to this festival. It's about alignment and communications, and I drew on my connections through IABC and reached out to almost 30 leaders in communication across the world, and they gave me their time and they contributed to the research. So it's just amazing what you can actually do if you can call upon them. So it's about investing in those relationships, and you don't feel guilty about calling on them because you know that you've done things for them, they'll do things back for you. It's a quid pro quo, I suppose, in a way. Stephen, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that's right. And, reward, exchange, and connect are part of a spectrum. So, reward is about investing in the relationship and putting some reputation beans in the bank. Connect is about taking the chance to withdraw them and using those relationships to get things done. And as Zora said at the beginning, reward, exchange, and connect are more kind of personal styles. We're now going to move on to a couple of other styles which can work well when you don't necessarily have a relationship with somebody. And our first style is called inform, and this is symbolized by Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. I'm sure we have a few Harry Potter fans in the audience today. Her approach is based on facts and data and information and research. And whenever Harry and Ron are about to do something bad, she'll go to the library and do some research or investigate something and provide some facts and data and logic to help persuade them to behave in a bit of a different way. And this is a very common style in business. And the way you see it often is when people are talking about, evidence suggests this, or here are 3 reasons, or when you need to marshal some facts to persuade something, or do the ROI of communication or business case. And I think, one of the challenges of this style is that it's quite cerebral and logical. And I think as communication professionals, we definitely need to use inform, but we've got other styles at our disposal as well. And so, it's very good to have data and facts and information, but there are other approaches that you can use as well. And I think a big challenge that communication people have is they think that inform is the only way to go when they're trying to prove the value of their work. And my contention is you definitely need to do inform, but you've got other styles and other approaches that you can take to really get your point across, and you don't always have to play in the inform or the data playground. And one of those other areas you can play is in what we know as picture. So I'm going to hand back to Zora, who's going to talk about that.
Excellent. So I was trying to think of who is that visionary communication or communicator that conjures up that image of this particular style, and I couldn't go past Jacinda Ardern. This is an image from about 5 minutes away from my house. So I live in Melbourne, as I said, and this is put up on one of the silos in Brunswick soon after the Christchurch tragedy that happened. Jacinda Ardern is lauded for her empathetic and her strong leadership style in uniting people, and that's what this does. It's a visionary style. You're painting the picture of what the future could look like, what success could look like, and it's very much she's the sort of person that I was looking at this and thinking, what is a time that she's actually come out and said something that's been quite visionary. She had in Parliament, she did a speech, a 10-minute speech, which was about it was a historic climate change law passing, and she was talking about New Zealand will not be a slow follower because we cannot afford to be, and we have the potential to lead the way. So she was setting that scene and creating that picture. And she closed it with, I hope the next generation will see that we in New Zealand are on the right side of history. So she's got a particular style about her, which is that empathetic. It connects with emotion, which is a really important part of this particular style. Stephen, do you want to flick to the next slide? So as I said, you tap into the emotion, you paint the picture of success, and it's a really strong way to open and close a presentation, just showing that vision and painting that picture. So it's quite an important piece. Stephen, did you want to add to that?
No, I agree with that 100%. And I think, communicators who can use inform and picture in conjunction with each other can really produce stronger arguments and achieve greater influence than if they just use one particular style. There is one more style we want to talk about, which is exit. Although I live in London, England, I'm originally from Canada, and this is Chrystia Freeland, who's the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. And she symbolizes the exit style because a few years ago, when Canada and the European Union were trying to negotiate a free trade deal, it was on the verge of collapse. And she was in charge of the negotiations and basically decided to walk away. And there's quite a famous clip of her speaking in French, almost on the verge of tears, because she spent 3 years of her life trying to negotiate this trade deal and basically lashing into the European Union for not negotiating in good faith. And she says, and the only good thing about this is I get to go back to Montreal and be with my kids. So she exited in rather dramatic fashion from the negotiation. She wasn't getting the influence, she wasn't getting the change she wanted, so she walked out. Now, the coda for this is that she was actually back in the following week and the deal was signed and negotiated. So the thing about exit is you achieve nothing if you exit and do not come back. Exit is more about changing gear or taking the heat out of something, or just taking a break if you feel you don't get in your way. It can also be a chance to reset the relationship on your terms. You know, you don't have to be as dramatic as getting on a plane and flying to Canada for your exit. It can show itself in more subtle ways around, you know, can we just take a break, or let's have a coffee, or let me reflect on that and get back to you. And it can also be a good way of changing from one style to another. So I use the analogy of a clutch on a manual car. You know, in order to change gear, you need to actually get out of gear and go into a new one. And so exit is about taking the chance to just reset the conversation and try a different approach. And so if people say things like, let me reflect and come back to you, or you've said you're not getting anywhere, that's when you can use exit to do a little bit of a break. I also said earlier that influencing is a bit like languages. You know, sometimes you think, I'm not making any progress here. I need a different style. Perhaps I should use reward. Oh, wait a minute, but I don't have a relationship with this person, so I can't really use reward. Maybe there's someone else who can get involved. So sometimes you recognize you're not the right person to influence and you need to find someone else to help you. And that's when exit can provide that little bit of time to reset the relationship and maybe make progress in a different way. So that's the summary of the model. Zora, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say that throughout my career, I have found that I've actually used all 6 styles. And you do tend to have a preferred style, and it's important to recognise what your preferred style is and what the style is of the others that you work with, so you can call on them if you should need it for the particular context that you're going to be in terms of addressing different stakeholders and trying to influence different stakeholders in an organisation or elsewhere. I have generally, one thing that I think is really important to think about is that this isn't necessarily about being mercenary by any means. It is about having a level of influence that is going to deliver the best value for the project you're working on or the organisation that you're working with. So it's important to remember ethics through the whole thing. So it's, you know, you do have to think about ethics from the perspective of, am I doing the right thing, and is this the best way to approach it? Stephen, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And now I think we're going to try a little bit of an experiment with our interactive quiz. One of the challenges of running something like this is how to coordinate on a global basis. And Hopin actually has about a 10 or 15 second delay between what I'm saying now and when you will hear it. So we're going to try an interactive quiz. This is all about experimenting and seeing what works. What you'll want to do is please get your mobile phone out or log into a separate screen, because what we're going to do is a little bit of a quiz on influencing styles and how to recognize them in different situations. And I've pulled together some examples of government communications about coronavirus, COVID-19. And so we're going to see how that can work. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go here and here. So please find your phone or a separate screen and go to menti.com and enter in the code 1931555, which will be at the top of your screen. And what I'm going to ask you to do then is to try an example of the interactive quiz. So the first question I'm going to ask you is just, where are you listening from today? It's a bit of a test of the system, so please take a few moments to vote. Yeah.
Someone is up really early in Europe because, you know, you're up at the crack of dawn, so.
Well, it's 6:30 in the morning here, so.
I know.
Okay, speaking of 6:30 in the morning, we better crack on, otherwise we're going to run out of time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close that particular voting as a trial, and we're going to move on to the first real question. So this is an example from the New Zealand Ministry of Health, and which is all about update on coronavirus. So here you can see they've got a table of current cases and information about confirmed and probable cases of COVID-19, new cases reported in the past 24 hours, 1, active cases at the border in the community, and the update of the details. So your challenge is to think about what influencing style this is. And so what you need to do is you're going to register as a player, which I see you've done, and we'll start the voting now.
Hint, the quicker you answer, the more points you get.
So you can just click on your screen and say what influencing style you think that is. Okay. We had 25 votes for inform, which is the correct style. It's all about information and data. And here you can see the leaderboard. So whoever is calling themselves Homer, you're the winner. One of the things I love about Mentimeter is it's always kind of random in terms of how it assigns names and things like that. So I hope you like your nickname, whoever you are, Homer. Let's try the next question. So this is an example from the UK. This is the coronavirus job pension scheme, which is basically a furlough scheme for employees. Your employer can get a grant using the job retention scheme to help them pay for some of your wages. Check to see if your employer can use it. If your salary is reduced because of these changes, check if you're eligible for universal credit. So take a moment to think about what style that is and vote when you are ready. Okay, a bit of a split vote here. 13 of you went for exchange, which is a fair case, but I think in this situation, it's reward. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because I know the situation a bit more because it's from the UK. But this was basically the government giving out free money as part of the furlough scheme to ensure that people didn't suffer during coronavirus. So the 16 of you who pick reward, you get some extra points. And we can see now that Earthman is leading the table. Let's try the third question. This is an example from the White House, a press briefing given by President Trump on the 10th of September of this year. We're going to get through this coronavirus, and we're right now, I hope, really think we're going to. We're rounding the final turn, and a lot of good things are happening with vaccines and their therapeutics. So what influencing style is that? Okay. 17 votes for the picture style, which is correct. Trump here is painting a vision of the future. And as Zora was mentioning, this is a very common style for politicians to say how great things are going to be under my leadership. Okay, and it looks like we have a new leader. So congratulations, David Imber. Let's see if you can keep up your lead for the next 3 questions.
Well done, David.
This is an example from the government of Scotland. So the chief medical officer made a few trips during lockdown and had to resign because she'd lost all credibility. And what influencing style do you think was being applied in this particular case? Okay. Exit. 20 of you voted for exit. This is an example where her ability to influence was so compromised, she had to exit and find somebody else to be able to persuade people of Scotland to behave in a different way. She wasn't a credible influencer anymore, so she did the right thing by exiting, or probably, to be precise, she was forced to exit. But because she had no credibility, wasn't able to influence, it didn't make any sense for her to keep trying. And so it looks like David Imber is still just holding on to his lead, although Carolyn is catching up a little bit. Let's try an example. Let's try an example from the Australia Department of Health now. So this is a COVID Safe app. It's part of our work to slow down the spread of COVID-19. The new COVID Safe app is completely voluntary. Downloading the app is something you can do to protect you, your family, and friends to save the lives of other Australians. The more Australians connect to the COVID Safe app, the quicker we can find the virus. What influencing style is the Australian Government Department of Health using here?
Stephen, have I ever told you that doing these sorts of games makes me really nervous?
I've seen some chat about that. Okay, so 12 of you voted for Connect and 9 of you voted for Exchange. I think this is probably slightly more Exchange than Connect, because it's saying you download the app, we'll be able to save lives. There is an element of Connect there as well, but it's really about a transaction or two-way process that's going on there. So that's why we think this is more of an Exchange style, because you need to do something in return rather than just a pure Connect style. But I think, that raises an important point, because a lot of times on influencing, it's about a combination of different styles. So in this particular case, there's definitely elements of Connect as well, but we think it's primarily about Exchange.
David, you're doing very well.
David is doing well. We'll have to find a prize for him afterwards. Right, let's move on to the final question then. This is an example from the Government of Canada. Call to action. Canadian manufacturers needed to help combat COVID-19. If you are a Canadian manufacturer or business that can assist Canada in meeting the need for medical supplies, your help is needed. We are stronger when we work together. Okay. 19 of you chose Connect, which is, we believe, the correct answer. It's all about supporting Canada and doing something for Canada as Canadian citizens. So let's have a look at the leaderboard. Okay. So, David Imber, congratulations. You are the winner. If you send us your details, we'll put a prize in the mail for you. So congratulations on winning the influencing skills quiz. I'm now going to stop the screen.
I do know David Imber, by the way.
Oh, right. Well, you can send him the prize in to save me postage from London.
Exactly.
So, so thank you very much, all of you, for participating in that experiment. We've got a bit of time for some Q&A at the moment. I've seen there's been a bit of a chat in the chat box, so please, if you have any questions, we've got about 5 minutes, and we're here to answer those questions.
Stephen, tell me, what do you think is the most difficult influencing style to apply?
I think that the ones people have the most challenge with, I think, are probably Connect and Exit. Connect because you need to know when you can ask a favor of someone and when you've got enough reputation beans in the bank to be able to call on that favor. And, because reward and Connect are kind of opposite, there's some people who put loads of reward in the bank and never cash it in. There's other people who try Connect a bit too often and end up being overdrawn. So getting the balance between those two is tricky. And I think exit is sometimes hard to do because, you know, it's a bit of a risk that you might not succeed. So knowing when to play exit card is really important. And I guess the easiest way to think about that is, you know, sometimes introducing a bit of a delay in the process. You know, oh, Zora, I'd love to do that for you, but I'm quite busy today. Can I wait till tomorrow? It's kind of mini exit, but also a bit of a way of, you know, sometimes being a bit more hesitant or not always being at someone's beck and call when it comes to influencing. So that can be quite a useful style in the work environment, because, you know, often we all want to be nice to our colleagues and help our colleagues out, but sometimes that means their agenda might take over your agenda. So sometimes a little bit of just a temporary exit, or can I get back to you tomorrow, or, you know, give me 5 minutes, or whatever it is, can be really helpful to give you control over your own agenda a little bit.
Now, Stephen, when your audio wasn't working very well, I didn't actually go into the corporate snakes and ladders at that time, or how recipe actually came up. Did you want to just explain that for a second? Oh,
sure.
Before you go, Bronwyn has a question. Are there any strategies that shouldn't be used together, or ones that work particularly well together?
Yeah, so I think, you know, inform and picture can work really well together, as I was saying earlier. And then, you know, reward, exchange, and connect, it's often a case of picking one of those. So that's where, you know, you can use a combination. And as you were saying before, the reward, exchange, connect spectrum is good when you have some kind of connection or relationship with people. Inform and picture are useful in larger groups and audiences.
That's right. Any other questions? We have a opportunity to answer another one if anyone has one. Feel free to type it into the chat whilst Stephen explains how this came about.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the reasons why we're speaking here at the GovComms conference is that this process started in some of the work we were doing for the UK government and the UK government communications service. And we developed a kind of business simulation called Corporate Snakes and Career Ladders, which was really designed to help government communication professionals go from technical expert to strategic advisor. And so we created a kind of pretend government department they could play in, and created some characters of a minister and a political advisor and a permanent secretary, and, you know, other characters in the department for them to practice their advisory skills on. And one of the things we got asked to do was to develop this influencing ideas to help people think about different ways of influencing. And so Recipe was used by communication professionals across government in the UK to, you know, learn a different approach to influencing. And we did some role plays and some practicing for them to help with that. And I've also put in the chat a little link to a little online quiz that you can do to explore influencing styles a bit more. And what I'll do is I'll just share my screen and put that up in a bit of a bigger way. So you can fill in a self-assessment survey and get a customized report and coaching session about influencing if you like. That link is in the chat, and we can also give you a report and a coaching session if you wish. So if you do want any more information, please get in touch with us. We're very happy to share some of our work, and I know a couple of people were interested in hearing more about the quiz and how that works. So please do get in touch with us directly, and we can tell you more about that. And Zora, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so you can connect with us, as Stephen said there, on our emails, and we represent different areas, or you can find us on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's pretty easy. From next week, I'll be sharing a new report that I mentioned earlier on alignment and communication, and it'll be available by email to everyone on the GovComms Festival, and it'll also be up on my website from Tuesday next week. So you'll be able to download that, and I promise I do not spam anyone because I personally hate it, so I don't do that. So you'll be able to download that if you're interested in finding out a bit more about that information.